Inevitable, irreversible, unprecedented. UN Code Red warning over climate change. They say we must act now to avoid catastrophe, with floods, fires and droughts set to become more frequent as the world keeps getting hotter. The extreme weather we've been seeing over the past few weeks alone and its effects, floods, fires and droughts, is likely to happen more often, causing devastation both here and in the rest of the world. That's the warning from a major UN report. It said there's no doubt that we humans have driven climate change, some of which is irreversible. But experts said there's still time to limit the damage to our planet by drastically cutting emissions. World leaders will discuss that during crucial talks in Glasgow in November, and exactly what achieving that goal might mean for us all. Our deputy political editor Anushka Asthana reports on what's been called a code red for humanity.
We've been hearing about the threat of climate change for decades, but now we can't ignore it. There's been total devastation in Germany and Belgium. Parts of California reduced to wasteland. And extreme weather in Britain too. In London and previously in Shropshire, where flooding wrecked Beverly Flynn's home.
It's a level of anxiousness that I've never known before, because it's an element that you can't control. And when you find yourself at 3 o'clock in the morning standing in water to your chest almost, and you're not sure whether it's river water or whether it's sewer water, that is quite devastating. It plays on your mind.
Like millions of others, Beverly is desperately trying to protect her home. These are the human stories behind the UN's landmark science report declaring climate change is now code red for humanity. Scientists say that since 1970, temperatures have risen faster than in any other 50-year period over the past 2,000 years. They fear that a target of keeping warming below 1.5 degrees will now be breached within 20 years, unless there is immediate, rapid and large-scale reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. One of the authors of the report says that what is needed is a 5% cut in emissions year on year.
Just to put that into context, last year during the pandemic, a consequence of the global lockdowns, the carbon dioxide emissions were reduced temporarily by about 6%. So what we're talking about is reductions of that scale, but to be sustained over several decades.
Just think of the politics around that. Boris Johnson says he wants to get the balance of greenhouse emissions in the UK to net zero by 2050.
One of the things that charities say is there's a gap between the rhetoric and the targets, which are great, and the reality. Just to give you one example, the rate at which you're replacing gas boilers with heat pumps is something like 20 times slower than your own targets to do it.
No, you're right, and that's why we need to ramp it up. But you look at electric vehicles, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there was no take-up, and now we're accelerating that. And I think a similar development is going to happen in terms of heat pumps and also moving people away from gas power. We're beginning that process, and we need to drive it much more aggressively.
As ministers gear up to host a major climate summit this autumn, it's not just flooding causing concern. Coastal erosion, heat waves and even wildfires are already a reality here too. Anushka Asthana, ITV News.